Welcome to the Global Network webinars. My name is Alexander Loschke, and I will be moderating this webinar today together with my colleague Panya Yu. Today we have with us Angelica Lo Duca from the National Research Council of Italy, who will explain why understanding audiences is important to shape impactful data stories. Creating a data story means shaping a clear message and then bringing it to life for different audiences. The core story does not change. What changes is how it is shared, the language used, and the emphasis placed on specific elements. In this webinar, we will explore how to adapt the delivery of the same data story to different audiences with clarity and impact. We will look at what each audience values, what captures their attention, and what helps them act on the information. You will gain practical techniques for making one story work effectively for decision makers, operational teams, and the general public. The aim is to ensure that the message resonates and motivates action. And let me introduce now our speaker. Angelica is a researcher at the Institute of Informatics and Telematics of the National Research Council in Italy. She is also an adjunct professor of data journalism at the University of Pisa, and she has published over 60 scientific papers at national and international conferences and journals. She's the author of several books, including her recent book with the title Become a Great Data Storyteller. And before I hand over to Angelica, just as usual, a few remarks. You can write your comments and questions into the meeting chat at any time. But during the Q&A section, it would be nice if you could raise the hand and ask the question yourself. As always, this Global Network webinar is being recorded and will be made available on the new Global Network of Data Officers and Statisticians, which transitioned from Yammer to LinkedIn groups. So if you haven't joined the new Global Network yet, we invite you to follow the link in the chat. I will put it there in a second. And to join the group on LinkedIn. And we also would like to ask you to sign up for our newsletter as well, following the other link in the chat to ensure that you get our monthly updates also in the future. And now I would like to hand over to Angelica. Angelica, the floor is all yours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Alexander, for the introduction. I'm sharing the screen. Can you see? Can you see my screen? Okay.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, I'm starting with the great news for you, which is a very important news. And the news is that you are not your audience. You don't speak for yourself, and you don't speak to show your knowledge. You speak for someone who wants to learn more about the data you know and have analyzed. And so if you show to your audience something like this slide, you are speaking for yourself, because the audience doesn't have the time to read all the labels here, all the text here. The audience doesn't have the time to identify which slice of the pie is involved. So you are not your audience. When you build something, specifically a data story for your audience or for someone, for the first question you should ask is Is this element for yourself or for your audience? Because if it's for yourself, don't show it. Use it as a private note and show only your face to the audience. You don't need even slides. If instead the element you are designing is for the audience, clear it as much as possible so the audience can follow you and the element description simultaneously. So the idea is to remove noise independently of the audience you are considering, because you don't speak for yourself and you have to give your audience what they want. In general, there are different types of audiences based on you are, what element, what element you are considering. For example, you can classify audiences based on their attention or the interest they have in your topic. So you can have very interested people or hostile people. But in this talk, we don't have time to analyze this type of audience. Instead, we focus on what the audience knows about the topic you are describing. And based on this, you can classify the audience in three macro categories. The general audience, that usually don't know your topic, and their objective is to learn or to be informed related to something. Then you have a technical audience which wants to understand, to monitor and control something, or specifically the system you are describing. And finally, there are executives who want to make decisions. Okay, but this classification, unfortunately, is not absolute because it depends on the context you are considering. For example, consider me. I am a computer engineering. I have a PhD in computer engineering. And so you can assume that I am a technical audience. But if you share with me a story about fashion styles monitoring, here I'm not a technical audience. I don't know anything about the fashion styles monitoring. And so here I am general audience, although my background is in computer engineering and I have a PhD in computer engineering. At most, I could be a technical general audience. Okay, so at this point, you belong to a category of audiences in general based on two main scores or main criteria. You can calculate a criteria and define if you are relating to a specific topic, if you are a general audience, a technical audience, or a audience of executives. You define firstly the familiarity score, which measures how well a person knows or feels comfortable with a specific topic, product, or activity. It reflects prior experience or exposure. In short, how familiar the subject is, how well you know the topic. You have also another score, which is the synthesis score, which measures the ability to understand information and summarize it clearly and concisely. It reflects the capacity to capture key points without losing the overall meaning. In short, how well someone can synthesize what they have understood. Just to have an idea. In my case, I have a low familiarity score with the fashion style monitoring topic, but maybe I have a high synthesis score because I have a background in computer engineering. So imagine that you have a line where you put on the right, on the left, the synthesis, and on the right, the detail. And you also have a vertical line with the familiarity. You go from low familiarity to high familiarity. People with high familiarity to a topic and high level of detail, they are technical people. People with high familiarity and high synthesis, they are executives. High level of synthesis and low familiarity, they are general public, and low familiarity and detail, they are technical general public. This is the idea, the mapping, and this is specific to each topic. It's not absolute. It depends on the topic you are considering. And for this, I'd like to involve you directly to make a quick survey to understand the level of familiarity with the specific topic that I'm going to share with you and the level of synthesis. And now in the chat, I share you a link for a 4-minute survey. I'll use the results as for my research studies. So if you don't want to contribute to this research, don't take the survey, or you don't submit the survey. And yes, I'll use the results for research purposes. And in this survey, you will see randomly one of 3 stories. These are 3 stories, and we will see next at the end, in the following, after the survey, we will see each of these stories. And these stories are all about the same topic, but they are adapted to different audiences. And now I will give 4 minutes to complete the survey. Thank you. Okay, thank you so much for those who have answered to the slides. Just a moment that I update the results. Just a moment. Okay, so we have obtained 25 answers with a level of familiarity of to the topic of 0.4 and a level of synthesis of almost 0. Between 0.5 and 0.6. So the level of synthesis is quite high, and the level of similarity or familiarity below the half. The maximum value is 1. So we have a high synthesis and low familiarity, high synthesis and low familiarity. So we can say that you are a general public for this topic. Okay, so now we can see how the original story was, the original story that has been constructed was, and how next we will see how to adapt this type of story to different audiences and how you can work to adapt the story to different audiences. Let's start with this. Our company has it's an example generated with with fictional data. Assume that our company has a portfolio of two main products, A and B, and we have the sales in the past 2 months. This is for product A and B, and also the total number of sales across the entire period. We have also calculated the margin, which is the profit generated by both products, and we have also the total margin for both products. What we can see is that you can see product B has a higher margin than product A, but product A has a higher number of sales compared to product B. Okay. Next, well, what we can see from the data that on month 7, there was a marketing campaign on product A, and this is given by the peak for product A. And the sales of A increased, but at the same time, the margin did not increase accordingly. And this means that A is sensitive to promotions. This means that volume rises, but margin get compressed. Obviously, because if we increase the promotions, the sales increase, but also the profit decreases because we have a lower gain. Then on month 10, there was also a supply issue affecting product B. And this was here. And as you can see, the number of sales for product B decreased. And this also was mapped also in margin. So this means that B drives margin. Even a small disruption has a noticeable impact on profitability. And the total margin for both products is this, with the marketing campaign on product A and the supply issue affecting product B. This means that the portfolio reacts differently depending on which product changes. A amplifies demand, B amplifies profit. A brings customers in, B monetizes them. If either one is unbalanced, the portfolio becomes less efficient. And this strategy is to manage the balance between A and B, not to optimize them in isolation. This is the general story. It's organized in 3 acts. I have not said this because we don't have time to see to the story structure. But as you can see, this is a general story which is not adapted to any audience. It's the story which says that A drives sales and B drives margin. Now let's adapt this story to executives. Executives are people who want to make decisions based on evidence. And your objective is to facilitate the decision-making process. So you want to communicate the strategic message and lead to clear decisions. Let's see at the first part of the story. This one. This was the slide that I showed you before. This is the first part. This chart for executives is not useful because they are not interested in lines. They are interested in something more general. And if you show this trend line to the executives, they can focus on details such as, for example, this peak or this negative peak, but doesn't help them to make decisions. So you can remove this. Regarding the sales, the problem here in sales is that looking at this chart, you may think that product A is better than product B, but in reality, product B drives margin. And so showing this slide to a public of executives may bring them to make the bad decision. And so if we show volume first, the conclusion becomes A sells more, so A is more important. But the real story is that A generates demand, while B capture margin, and value comes from balancing them. And for this reason, for executives, you can remove also this chart. Regarding margin, the same description made for sales can be done also for margin. Don't show the trend line at the beginning because executives may be may get lost, and so you can remove this because it doesn't focus on the objective. The objective is to make decisions. This chart instead is useful because you are showing that product B brings more margin than product A. So let's keep this. And we can say our company has a portfolio of 2 main products, A and B. Maybe the executives already know this, and so you can remove also this. What you can leave is product A drives volume, product B drives margin. And you can show this chart. Regarding the second part, which is the all this stuff related to the trend line on marketing campaigns, if you show all this information to the executives, they are overloaded and they aren't able to make decisions. So the only thing that you need to save in this slide is A is sensitive to promotions. Volume rises, margin get compressed. While for B, it's the same thing. B drives margin. Even a small disruption has a noticeable impact on profitability. This means that all these charts can be removed. And the only chart that you can show, just to give an idea to your executives, is the chart about the total margin, both A and B, because the executive looks at the total margin of the portfolio and not to the single element. And so you can show this chart. In general, you can write this. You can organize your slide in this way, or if you want, okay, yes. And finally, there is the final call to action. The call to action, which is the next steps, the strategic recommendations for your decision makers. You can say that this was the original slide. You can adapt this part so that the executives can make some decisions. And what kind of decision they can make? For example, they can use A to generate demand and protect availability and positioning of B. The idea is to evaluate performance at the portfolio level and not to work at the single level. As you can see here, the story is always the same because you are saying always the same things, but you have adapted it to a specific target audience. And the final story, which some of you have seen in the survey, is this: balancing demand A and profitability B. You show the total margin. You show the roles of each product. Product A drives volume reach, product B drives profitability margin. A grows the market, B creates value. This is the context where you define the variable. Then you show the impact of promotion and supply disruption on total margin, with the marketing campaign and the supply issue affecting product B. You give the strategic recommendation for this type of audience, and finally, you leave something, a message to remember for this type of audience. For example, value comes from the balance, not from volume alone. This was for the first type of audience. Now let's adapt the same story for the technical audience. This type of audience wants to understand the mechanism to improve control. And your objective is to reveal the underlying structure and sensitivity of the system. So in this case, the objective of this audience is to understand how the two variables, which are the product A and the product B, can be used to control the system. And so this slide at the beginning is useless, because if you show it again, this technical audience risks to focus on details that at this level are not relevant. So remove this and show only this information. The total sales, yes, because here you are showing the first variable of control. The same thing is for this second type of chart, which is not useful at this stage. Instead, show the total margin, how it is affected by product A and product B. And so the first part of your chart, of your story, is this, where you define the variables. But this is not sufficient. You can also add a table which explains specifically the role of each product. The product is the variable which controls the demand in, the flow. The role is to expand reach, because it helps you to reach more customers, and it's controlled via price and promotion. The product B instead measures the profit out or the value capture. It converts the demand into margin, and it's controlled via supply positioning. If you put this information in your story, the technical audience can directly understand how they can play and they can control the system through the two variables. And so also these slides are not necessary. This slide is not necessary. Instead, this slide can be useful to show the trend line. Maybe you can add a detail showing the product B, also align with the product B, because the product B controls the margin. And the control strategy for these technical people is to model price elasticity of A, maybe through simulations, model supply and margin sensitivity of B, and also identify the optimal operating region. As you can see, we have the same story adapted to a different audience. And here we have the portfolio margin flow A versus value capture. You show the two charts for the two products. You show the table, you show the trend line, and finally you show the call to action. Finally, we have very quickly the general audience because the time is, we have no time. The general audience is have the objective to understand and learn about a specific topic. And your objective is to make the understanding process easy. Here I show only the final story. The final story is that we have to make everything easy. So we show only the people reached without any number and the profit created. And we say that product A brings people in, product B captures value. Product A and B work together like two teammates. One brings attention, the other brings value. We need both. And so the message for this audience can be when comparing things, don't ask which is bigger. Ask what role does each one play. So we have seen in all the cases, we have told the same story. But we have not manipulated data. The data is always the same. The story is always anchored to the same data, but we have adapted the story to the specific target audience. And to conclude, I'd like to leave a message from a book that I'm currently reading, that sharing data isn't just sharing numbers. It's a way of sharing the product of your hard work. And if you are like me, sharing your work feels vulnerable. It's taking an object you put your heart and soul into and putting it in front of everyone. It's a vulnerable act. And this is extracted from the book by the K-12 Educators Data Guidebook by Estrellado. And I thank you very much for your attention and for completing the survey.
Thanks so much, Angelica. Great presentation. So now we come to the Q&A session. And as always, you can ask your questions either by putting them into the meeting chat or by raising your hand, and we will give you the floor. And the latter is actually preferred. So I'm just enabling now the microphones and the cameras. So if you want, you can come in now with some questions. So please raise your hand if you have a question for Angelica, and we can give you the floor. So Maybe I'll start off with one of the questions then from the registration forms. And
Yes.
so so there was one question there in the registration form, which is more general one, and maybe we can start with that one. So the question was there, how can one communicate with large non-specialized audiences? Can you maybe say a few things about this?
Yes, I think that these types large audiences are very heterogeneous. So you have to consider that you can't capture all of them because the audience is always segmented, and the bigger is the audience, the bigger is the difference among them. And the idea is that anyway, this was the bad news, but the great news, the good news is that if this audience is listening to you, they have some kind of interest, at least to the topic. And so my personal experience to involve the greatest number of people possible of people is to start to define a great hook. And in this way, you can capture the attention and then you can start speaking. And the best idea is to start with a personal experience where you show your vulnerability. Because just recently I attended a webinar where it was on a completely different topic about novels and films and the problem of conflict in novels. And they asked the question, why do we read novels where the protagonist has problems? The answer is that otherwise they lived a life better than ours. And so the idea is to show your vulnerability and to this brings you on the part of the audience. And I have this recommendation, don't pretend to convince all the audience if the number is elevate, and respect everyone, and also start with your personal experience, even if you are presenting some data.
Thanks, Angelica. I see now a few questions in the meeting chat, and maybe we can start off with a question by Gabriel. Gabriel, if you can, maybe you can come in personally and ask the question yourself. If that is not possible, I could read out the question.
Alex, yes, I sorry for that. I'm trying to switch on my cam, but it's not working so far.
No worries.
Or maybe it's coming in a few seconds. I wanted just to, of course, to thank Angelica for this very interesting presentation. It's very good for us also to hear that this storytelling is not only about what we call official statistics, but actually storytelling is everywhere as soon as you have data, and this is very interesting. But I was wondering if beyond the storytelling, and I don't know if you have some experience in that, beyond the storytelling, if you have also some experience about which communication or dissemination channels are the most appropriate for these various audiences. Do you, for example, press release, a technical documentation, using social media and so on? Thank you, Angelica, if you can answer this question.
Thank you, Gabriel, for your question. Yes, I have an idea a little bit original. And my idea is that, and I explain also it in my book, is that specifically there is not a specific channel to disseminate a data story. The idea is to retell your story multiple times using different channels. And I have an example. For example, you want to share your story with your data with your boss. You make a wonderful live presentation through slides. And after the meeting, your boss forgets everything because usually you forget what you listen in 2 days. You retain 10% of your or what you have listened. So the idea is to before the 2 days end, to repropose your story in a different format. For example, by email. You send an email to your boss and you say them a quick recap of your story. The story is always the same, because the idea is that you have clear the idea of your story. If you look at the slides that I have presented, the story was clear from the beginning, and the story has not changed. The story is always the same. You always you have your story. You can adapt to different channels. After your boss reads the email, okay, after 2 days, they forgot the story. They forget the story. And so you can retell your story in a different way, for example, through a 1-minute video. Because you have everything ready, the story is ready. You need only to change the channel. And you can adapt it to the different channels, or even more to different audiences. So there is not a specific channel for a specific audience. You must try, because the idea is that the audience is not absolute. As I have said before, the audience depends on the topic. And so the classification of the audience depends on the topic and also on the specific person. Maybe I prefer LinkedIn, another person prefers Instagram, and so you can't have a general channel valid for all these categories, for a specific category of audience. Try different channels for the same audience, and you will see the best channel.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Angelica. I think this question, there's another question in the chat which goes into a similar direction, right? So Todesca asks by ONS's Instagram official account, so official of offices for or national offices for statistics. Do you think you are always talking to the general public when you use, for instance, Instagram? Or there are some messages that could be designed for more technical users using the same channel? I think you have said already a few things about that, but maybe you can add a few more things.
Yes, maybe the idea is to try different strategies and see which one works best for your specific target audience. The idea, maybe you can provide, if it's a general, a channel for general public, maybe you can publish two versions of the same story, one for the general public and one for a technical audience. And if you discover that the story for technical audience gains more likes, more sharing, more comments than the other, maybe you can consider the other times also to publish this second type of story. But the idea is that you have the original story, and once you have designed your original story, you can adapt it as you want to different audiences, to different channels, as you want. The effort is in this designing the original story, the great effort.
Thanks. There's another question by Omar. Omar, I'm not sure if you would like to come in yourself and ask the question. Again, if you have questions, please put them in the meeting chat or raise your hand right now. So I can read it out for Omar. So Omar is asking, would this approach work also with policymakers when it comes to presenting the results of household living condition surveys that sometimes show uncomfortable numbers?
Yes, I think that the preliminary question that you have to ask is what do you want that your audience will do after your presentation? And if these policymakers should do something related to the household living conditions, then you have to consider what they care about, and you should adapt your story to this. But maybe these policymakers can be considered also as a type of decision makers.
Thanks.
And so, yes.
Yeah. And another question that maybe I have here is, what would you suggest to do to start with the call for action and then present why you should act on something based on the data, or first show the data and then call for the action?
Yes, that's a great point. But if you show the end of the story, you don't follow the story. The idea is to structure your representation as a story. If in a novel you already know that the protagonist wins something, you don't read the story. You don't read the novel. The idea is to have a story to, in some way, also to entertain, because a story is also something emotionally involving. And so if you can involve your audience, maybe they can follow your suggestions probably. I don't know. Because the idea is that you present the call to action, but you don't know if the audience follows your call to action.
Mm.
And instead, through a story, you involve your audience, and maybe they are more engaged, and they are more available to follow your guidelines, your calls to action.
Yeah, thank you. I see also Panya has his hand up. So Panya, please come in.
Yeah, first of all, thank you, Angelica, for a very useful and practical presentation. Just a quick question from my observation. I think oftentimes we are quite good at customizing our messages to different audiences, but we are not as good at stopping at the very beginning to think about which audience are we trying to reach. So your framework, the quadrant that you show, right, of the synthesis and high or low detail levels, and those 4 audiences are very useful. But I wonder if you can share a little bit more about like this very important first step of determining who your audience is. Are there any other tips, any practical checklist or things that you can do to stop yourself from immediately trying to craft the message, but to actually stop and pause and think very, very carefully about who you want to communicate to? And I think this is something that potentially we in official statistics don't do enough of. And if you have any tips for us to kind of try to use more time in that first step. Thanks.
Yes, this is thanks, Panya, for your very interesting question, because it's something that I call audience evaluation or audience testing. Actually, I'm studying this topic, and I have not a definitive answer, but I can share my experience. The first thing is the ideal position is to have a subset of your audience, a pilot test, and you can interview them directly and ask them what they want and other similar stuff, their objective. In this way, you can understand, at least at a small scale, who is your audience. But sometimes you don't have access to this type of audience because it requires great effort to collect information by people. And a thing I am experiencing now, and I am trying now as a researcher, is to use artificial intelligence to simulate audiences. And so you provide to this to AI, especially ChatGPT or other tools, the potential characteristics of your audience, and you try to provide your document, your report, your story to this to artificial intelligence, and you ask some questions to evaluate your material, your documents. And usually ChatGPT, I have tested ChatGPT, answers with something near realistic. And you can have an idea, a very preliminary idea of what you should modify or add to address, to reach that particular audience. In general, you should know who is your audience, because at least in very general, I want to speak to my boss. I want to speak to policymakers. In general, you know the general characteristics of your public, but you don't know their specific details. And for this, you can make some preliminary simulations through artificial intelligence. I have recently presented a scientific paper about this. Maybe when it's published, the proceedings are published, I can share in the global network, just for curiosity.
Yeah, please do share when it's ready. Thank you for that.
You are welcome.
Thanks, Angelica. There's one more question, and then, well, 2 questions. Okay, so let me start with a question by Caroline. Caroline Wood, you would like to come in, or otherwise I can ask the question for you, as you wish.
Okay, what Yes.
Hello. Thank you, Angelica, for your presentation. No, I think my question is very simple. I like the fact that you said you show your vulnerability when you start a presentation. And I wanted to understand the why and the how you would do in something as dry as a marketing presentation. How do you do something like that? What is the objective of showing vulnerability right from the start? Thank you.
Yes, there are different ways. One way, for example, is, for example, a product doesn't sell. You can bring an example. You can bring with you what I call the sidekick, who is a person, a supporting character in the story, who helps you to make the data more human. And you can bring a real customer and present all the problems they faced with the product. Their real experience where they say, oh, this is done with a very low quality material. And maybe this is not a specific story of vulnerability, but it's a story. And the idea is that the human beings are more, we are born with the idea of stories. And so if we listen to stories, not only vulnerabilities stories, we are more available to listen.
Thanks, Angelica. So we're now at time at 9:30 New York time. So we would like to wrap up now. Maybe I can ask the audience of this webinar to put on the camera for a few seconds and maybe unmute yourself and give Angelica a nice round of applause for the great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Angelica.
Thanks so
Thank you
much.
very much.
I also wanted to point out that so after the webinar, if you still have questions, please go to the global network of data officers and statisticians on LinkedIn. We have shared the link in the chat. So you can go there and ask follow-up questions to Angelica once we have posted there the recording and the slides of this webinar. And I would like also again to show this slide with the Global Network member survey for this year. So this really will help us to shape the future of the Global Network. We will ask questions about what kind of topics you are interested in for future webinars. So please also go there. And if you haven't joined yet the Global Network on LinkedIn, in the chat, you will also find the link to the LinkedIn group. I can put it once more there. And then also the link to the subscription form for the newsletter. And with that, thanks again to Angelica for the presentation today. And
Thank you.
thanks to everyone for joining and have a good rest of your day. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.